Hi, it's Warren Huart here. Hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm sitting here with my friend Ulrich. Ulrich Wild, how the devil are you, mate?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we hung out and talked music.
Yeah.
Which is like pretty much my favourite thing to do. Don't tell my wife. Actually, my favourite thing to do is play with my kids. My second favourite thing to do is to talk music.
Yeah, wife kind of fades into the background, unfortunately. She didn't know she was the mistress.
Oh, yeah, that's actually a really good point. We could go on for hours. I mean, like, for what we do, this isn't like, you can't just be like, well, I'm going to turn up and do 4 or 5 hours and see how it goes.
This is a big commitment, time-wise, yeah.
How long have you been doing this, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I got started in, like, was that 88 in a studio in San Francisco, Alpha and Omega Studios.
So, but when you grew up, did you do music in Switzerland?
Yeah, I was in, like, low life metal bands in Switzerland that don't really go anywhere because Switzerland.
Right.
It's too nice. It's too beautiful there. It's hard.
It is beautiful.
There's occasionally a metal band or anything musically comes out of Switzerland that's kind of worth noting.
Could have its own genre like banking metal.
And I guess there's some kind of brutality in there somewhere.
Yes.
In the banking, but I'm not sure if people would really want to hear complaints about making that much money or something.
I make too much money. Well, look, I love your studio. Now, you said you were just telling me you purpose-built this when on your house.
Yeah, we were remodeling, and as the music business was changing, we decided to finally put a studio into the house. I mean, when I started out, it was all about big, beautiful consoles and big rooms and, like all this equipment everywhere. And the budgets were there to accommodate it or to warrant it, And that all changed. Yeah. And we needed to make adjustments to accommodate smaller budgets because very often good music doesn't have the big budget.
Right.
And,
yes.
I go where the music is, so you got to accommodate.
No, it's fantastic. Yeah. Well, I love your gear selection. We were just talking about these speakers while we're faced this way because we both saw these at NAMM, didn't we? Yeah. They're pretty tasty. They're Gibson's new speakers. They have 3 sizes, don't they?
Yeah, small, medium, and large.
Small, medium, and large.
It's like a drink of choice right there.
Yeah, and I think they sound pretty nice. And in this size of room, I think it's a nice kind of size. Now, what did you have before that you kind of moved from?
I had those Dynaudio Acoustics BM6As, which served me well. But I bought them back when they were going to be more like near fields, like on top of the console kind of speakers. And now that I'm console free, as you can see, they kind of didn't serve their purpose anymore. Needed something like not necessarily bigger, but louder. Sure. And they just didn't get loud enough to like be exciting to do overdubs.
Right. Absolutely.
That's the main thing.
It's that kind of place we live in where we're always telling people don't monitor too loud. But when you've got a kid guitar player sitting here, he doesn't want to listen to this level.
No, it's rock and roll. You need to rock out, And even while mixing, you need to crank it up sometimes to make sure that it sounds good when it's cranked up because other people are going to crank it up. Yeah. It's really the prolonged listening and the dangerous levels for extended hours that are going to be harmful to you. And really, it's probably more so a headphones thing than a loudspeakers thing. Especially for me, I'm really aware of monitoring levels, and I think I've always been. Right. So I don't feel like I'm in danger. I check my hearing every once in a while, and it's all still there. I hear stuff other people don't want to hear. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
great setup. You've got another person with the small Yamahas. What do you think about those?
I like those a lot, actually.
Great.
Again, when I set up shop here, and originally I set up shop in my A-frame attic upstairs. Right. And it's a totally built out attic, and it actually worked really well as a compression ceiling up there. But I've moved since. I couldn't do overdubs really on top of like my kid's bedroom.
I was about to say having kids and stuff.
It just makes a big, huge difference. But it came time to decide on speakers. Right. And I was so used to the NS10s because 20 years of NS10s or whatever.
You and me both.
And you know, love them or hate them, it was what I was used to.
Right.
And but they stopped making the damn things,
right.
for better or worse. And I had to make the decision, like, am I going to go chase this for my next 20 years, or am I going to adjust? And I took a pair down to the bomb shelter.
Right.
And just A/B'd them with the NS10s. They do pretty much the same thing as the NS10s, albeit at a bit of a different frequency range. Like what I'm getting at is the NS10s are very unforgiving.
Yeah.
They point out your crap mix.
Yeah.
And they make you work hard for it.
Yeah.
And that's what they do, but they're a little bit more pleasant.
Sure.
The grit's kind of gone. They pushed it up a little.
Yeah, the mid-range on NS10s, I think it's like a 7 dB lift at 1.5.
Yeah, it's kind of like this weird inverse Fletcher-Munson curve or something like that.
Yeah, it just kind of goes like this.
Yeah.
I always tell people about NS10s, the simple answer for me is like, if a guitar sounds offensive and a snare drum sounds horrible, you got to go.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got to be like,
yeah,
great.
And that's the beauty of the Gibsons, actually.
Yeah.
Because the Dynaudios, even though they sound great, they don't have that. It's just like you pump it in there and everything sounds pretty good right off the bat because it kind of has that pleasantness about it.
Sure.
And these things, once you get to the point of that grit being too much, you actually know it's too much. It's got to be. It really lets you know if it's just right.
Great.
And that is, they're very revealing in that way, and that's actually really cool. And the low end sounds really nice.
Right.
In this room, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
When
I heard them at NAMM, I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
And they call them the Les Paul.
Yeah, and they look great on top of it. And it's not just another black box again, you know? It's like everything's a black box.
And what about the KRKs?
I just recently got a pair of those, and I was actually pleasantly surprised. They're really good for checking, like, the low mids. Right. Which is odd. You wouldn't think that with a speaker like that. They're the same size, practically, as those Yamahas. Right. But they sound nothing like them. Like, they couldn't be further apart from them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Somebody said they sound chewy. And that's actually a really good description.
Well, these are great. I mean, it's great that you use these because, you know, these are affordable. I mean, affordable's obviously a relative
it's
term.
A relative term, but by comparison to the prices out there for speakers.
Oh, yeah. You can spend $10,000 plus on a pair of speakers. Yeah. I mean, I was in a studio the other day that had, Osbergers in it that PAD are making, and they sound fantastic, but it's $30,000.
Sure, yeah.
And I would never justify that in my studio.
We got mouths to feed, we got guitars to buy.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
guitar player. I look at malls in my studio, there's more guitars than anything else.
Yeah, of course. Having said that, though, you have to have the speakers that you trust.
Exactly. Knowing your speakers is more important still.
That it's probably the most important thing aside from your ears. I mean, it goes with your ears, really.
Yeah.
And I always get asked that question. What's the most important? What's your most your favorite equipment? What's the most important thing or whatever? And it's the speakers, really.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, because without that, you're flying blind, man.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, what about for starting off? If you're starting off with like headphones, do you have any go-to headphones? A lot of kids are starting off with like a laptop and a pair of headphones.
Yeah. I am not a headphone mixer.
Right.
I have headphones for overdubbing for musicians, and I do use that pair over here. I don't know how long I've had it.
The Sonys.
Yeah, it's just what is it? The 7506s. Yeah, they were about $100.
Yep.
And they're kind of bright, Yeah. They are kind of hollow sounding or whatever.
Right.
I guess they kind of complement what I need to hear. Or, you know what I mean? Like the things I don't hear in that, I can hear in there. So, I don't know.
I always do a headphone test last. I have a pair of those ultrasound headphones, and all I do is I mix, then put on a pair of headphones, listen to it, make some notes. It's usually like little level changes that I'm not subtleties, because, you know, even with all the different speakers I have, sometimes, you know, half a dB on this, that, and the other is like, did that do much?
Yeah,
Put on a pair of headphones. Whoa, why did I bring that up half a dB?
Yeah. You know, and that's always the case. Actually, what I do is I have a box account.
Right.
And I dump the mixes onto that and then check it on the phone.
Nice.
That's kind of like my Oratone now.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea. We were just driving the other day, and I listened to a mix on my phone. And the reason I was testing it is because I'd just been in a studio and listening to like a very well-known like pop R&B mixer. And I noticed mixes now have almost no top end in the way that you and I would think of rock and roll, where energy and choruses, cymbals, the guitar shrilling and stuff like that. And so what I did is I played like a rock and roll mix on my iPhone, and I get it, because now what happens is it literally is like vocal because of the size of the speaker.
Yeah.
And it's just splashing all over the place. Then play a pop mix, and it's like. It's like really tight.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of guys are sort of moving into everything being around like 2 and 3K. Like everything's got this kind of tight high mids, but no super splashiness going on, because it doesn't translate to the small speakers.
Yeah, that's a bit of a trick, you know. Yeah. Like because in metal we like that high end.
Yeah, you like the high end.
But I think and I think ultimately it still applies that like the sizzle of the cymbals and the fizz of the guitars and the sibilance of the vocals have to be balanced.
Sure.
And it, you know, it's not just like is the vocal loud enough, is the guitar loud enough? It's like each frequency band has to be balanced in and of itself.
Right.
You know, like the snare, the vocal, and the crunch of the guitar is a thing, you know, and the low end of the guitar, the upper, like the mids of the bass and the mids of the kick, it's like the low mids range, and then all the bottom stuff that needs to pump together.
It's great.
And you know, like if you can listen for those kind of elements and hear, like if one's not overpowering the other, I think you're pretty much in the ballpark of where it needs to be. After that, it's taste things, like, do we want to have a guitar heavy mix or not, or, you know.
Sure.
But even so, you still have to have balanced. And
do you use there's a question for me because I'm intrigued. Do you use multiband compression on stuff?
No.
Okay.
Not generally. I mean, but I do use multiband exciters, and I do use multiband transient shapers.
Nice.
Yeah. So I guess maybe that counts. It's all.
No, but I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
Because I just wonder, almost feel like when I hear like good, loud, slamming metal, it seems like everything like is almost in blocks. It's like, here's like, and it's almost like not a synth, but it's like big, large chunks of frequencies hitting you over the head.
Yeah. I think part of that is samples.
Right.
A lot of metal, if not all of it at this point, is very heavily kick and snare sample based and tom sample based.
Right.
Because it just needs to be, it needs to compete against so much guitar information.
Sure.
And I think it also happened because of the budgets. Like people actually programming drums now instead of playing them live.
Right.
You know, and so even if you do play your drums live, you're competing against that sound.
Right.
So you have to add the samples to your live drum kit.
Right.
Because you can't be like the odd sound out anymore. You know.
Sure.
I mean? But you kind of do want to be, you know, you always want to be different and special one way, but you also have to compete. So that's another balancing act that happens in mixing. That it's not just about instruments within the song. It's also the song within the album, and the album amongst the competition. You know?
Right. So. Absolutely. So tell me a little bit more, because I actually don't know a lot of things here. Like, what is this little artist?
This is my armrest.
That's your arm.
This is my most important thing, really, because it keeps your arm from falling off after.
Yeah.
It's true. You know,
no, I believe it.
Ergonomics, man. It's all about ergonomics. In August of 2006, I said, pretty much verbatim, I will never work and mix in the box, I will always mix on a console.
Right.
In the summer 2006, I said I will never work on a console ever again.
Right.
And I declared the console dead because what happened was that the whole large format analog mixing console happened because of 2-3 tape machines locked together, and you needed all these inputs, and that's what happened. You don't need that for tracking. You need 24 inputs somehow or another. Faders are nice, but it's like a little box about this size will take care of it. Like a big band,
Yeah.
So the big, huge consoles are there for for the mix, for these huge mixes. The effect returns, all of it, right? But the problem they have is they're expensive. They are hot. They're a monstrosity.
Electricity bills are insane.
I know. Air conditioning for it. There's a whole lot of it.
I have a 4000, so trust me.
Yeah, I know all about those beasts. Yeah. They're great. And the nostalgia factor for them is awesome. And it's just, I loved working on them, except for one thing. They're in this room and they're like sonically a monstrosity. I mean, they're reflective. They suck up blow wind. They bounce stuff around. And you're EQing a kick drum over here, and the speakers are over there. You're EQing the vocals over there, speakers are over there. You're constantly moving around. You have no idea. You're never sitting in the sweet spot, really.
Yep.
Unless you have to do some subgrouping thing.
That's a really great analogy.
And it's like
it makes that's great. If your kick drum's on channel 1, you walk down to that end over there. You got the speakers here. I like that. Then you go back and listen and go, oh no.
Yeah, and of course it was a lot fitter back then. You're constantly moving your chair along the console. And so the thing with this setup is it's compact. It's more like a mastering setup, really, where you always sit in the same spot. You have very little equipment over here. It's not much to get in the way. As you can see, I only have one small screen because it's really not the important part. It's about listening.
Very, very well put.
The screen, it's still too big and too close to me as far as I can't see anymore, but that's why it has to be now. But ideally, and one day maybe I'll get to it, I want to cut out a big section of this desk and lower the screen down into it, like SSL style. Mm-hmm. Because again, I don't want to sit like this and look like some people have the screens up there where the spider webs are. And that hurts my neck. So actually, I'm better off having it down here, right? Again, ergonomics. So one day I'm going to take a saw to this thing.
Sure.
And half the time. But then, you need the faders because there's a thing about moving a fader as opposed to moving a mouse.
Right. I agree.
And so I started out with the Mackie.
Huey.
The universal, not the Huey, the universal.
Oh, right.
Thing is what it was called, and that was great. It was a little slow, the whole MIDI based thing.
Right. This isn't MIDI based.
This is the Avid and Avidones, and now it used to be Euphonics.
Right.
Avidones, and that's the MC mix and MC control. I call them McMix.
Right.
Isn't it the McMix? It's the Yukon protocol. The software for this thing and the way it operates is like these old the Euphonics consoles,
right? And
so it's Ethernet based, and it's actually it's pretty fast. It's as close as I can get operationally to an SSL, believe it or not. I have my soft keys now dialed in, so I can select my automation. I can just cycle through the faders and get my automation modes going.
Right.
It's very quick, but I mix in Logic, and I don't know what it's like now mixing in Pro Tools, because I never did really mix in Pro Tools.
Oh, you didn't?
No. I did one record, and it was very cumbersome to me to mix in Pro Tools because, albeit that was a few years ago, that was 2006 actually.
Right.
Before I went into the mixing in Logic, the workflow in Pro Tools is such that you always have to stop. When you want to automate something in a plugin, you have to open a plugin, you have to select what it is you want to automate, then put it into this other bin, and then close it, and then you can finally automate that parameter.
Right.
I don't know if it's still like that or not. But in Logic, you just put the channel and record, and you automate what you want. You take the channel and record, and you're done.
Right.
You know what I mean? That I don't have to like do things all the time to make this thing work for me.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, you want to feel like you're on a console. And you just reach down and turn something.
Exactly.
Send a bit more verb. Adjust the verb.
And I never use like mapping, like getting the plugins mapped to knobs, because you're still looking at the screen and then you have to go find where that is. So I'm actually quicker using the mouse.
Right.
Because my eye and the mouse, the coordination is there, as opposed to breaking my visual to go look for that knob that's
right.
Which one's doing what, you know. Ideally, you know those was it the Ravens that Stephen Slade has?
Yes.
That I think is probably a step in the right direction. You know, where your contact is immediate, like you
right.
see your fader and you move it, as opposed to having like that disconnect between what's on screen. That's why I'm not good at video games either. You know, it's like. But you know, this is all kind of pared down. It's a pared down console. Got my little monitoring section. Nothing special. It's just a
Presonus
box. I like the remote portion of it. There's the Mackie big knob that all the cables come onto the desk. The one drawback of this is that the extension cord for the remote can only be so long. Ideally, that box would actually live back there.
Right.
And instead of having the line level
right
come out, that would be speakers coming through.
Right.
Speaking of dying, there he is.
Cool.
That was one of the drunken nights down in Texas.
What album or albums did you guys do together?
I did the Tendkill.
Nice.
Yeah.
What year was that?
95.
95. Oh wow.
Something like that.
So that was when people really were buying records.
Oh yeah. That was good times. Only engineer did that.
That's fine then.
Yeah.
You're saying he used to. What picks did he used to use?
I think it was those. That's really a question for Grady.
Right.
Grady, his guitar tech. But whatever picks they were, I think they were the green tortoise ones, or Tortex ones. And he would just cut some lines into the picks to rough them up a little bit to have some grip, so they wouldn't fly out of his hand all the time. That's
smart, because I do like the Tortex greens, because they actually dig in nicely, but they have no grip.
Yeah, just
so there you go.
Take a razor blade to them.
Dimebag Darrell's techniques.
Yeah,
take a Tortex and put X's in it. Smart.
But the guy to really ask about those things is Grady. He knows
his guitar tech.
Everything.
Yeah. Okay, so here's some fun stuff. Now, tell me a bit about this. I see you have a pair of them.
Yeah, I like things in pairs.
Right.
I like balance, I guess.
Sure.
I often use these actually for the hi-hat and the rides, and I put my I EQ my hi-hat on my rides so they balance each other, not just so they sound good, but they also balance the stereo field of the drums.
Nice.
And I don't know, that's just how I do it here with this thing. They're great little boxes, and they're very affordable. When I built this place, it was supposed to be a mixed place and overdub room.
Right.
And, the first thing that happened, I was like, hey, we got to track drums now. And I had to run out and get a bunch of stuff, because when all of a sudden you're talking drums, you're talking about 20 inputs as opposed to 2 inputs.
Right.
And so you're talking 20 mics, 20 cables, 20 preamps, 20 compressors, 20 EQs. Right. That gets expensive fast.
Right.
And I didn't go out and buy 20 of everything, but over the course I added more stuff and replaced things.
Right.
These stayed with me. Actually, we used this thing as OTEP's main vocal chain.
Right.
Because it just had it started to crap out a little bit when she's very dynamic. She goes from whispers to full on scream.
Right.
Within a second. And the overdriving of this box really complimented her voice.
Great.
And so we just kept using that. I mean, it's a good versatile little box. You know, you can look at it and they give you some numbers and like it says it's 80 hertz, but is it? You know what I mean? Just like it's you have to use your ear when you EQ these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then same thing with these guys. You know, with times 3 divided by 3 is like I'm not going to do the math and say, you know what I mean? Just like you use your ear because you're tuning your EQs. Sure. You know?
Absolutely.
And then
a lot of people like these Focusrites.
Yeah, these things are great.
What are you using them on?
I use them on a lot. They are very important for guitar sounds.
Oh, they are great.
I very often use them for kick and snare tracking.
Right.
Vocals go through there very often. They, I could have a good 24 of them. That would make me happy. Of course.
Well, I mean, United, their main console and main room is full of these.
Yeah.
People like them.
Yeah.
Now the 386, do you get to use that much?
Yeah, I use them on overheads all the time. This is my overhead box. I go from here into one of these things,
right?
And just use a little compression on it to dampen, or not dampen, but to reel in the snare.
And this is the Pro VLA2s.
Yeah, those are great little boxes. Again, very affordable.
Yeah, no, these are great. I mean, I started off my career with an ART mic pre that had a tube in it, which was a little box. Remember the square thing? Mm-hmm. I think it was $99 from Guitar Center.
Yeah.
And I just plugged in my AKG C1000.
Uh-huh.
Remember those?
Yeah.
That you could either use on Phantom or with a battery. And that was like, between that and a 57, that's how I started making records.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to knock ART stuff because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I didn't know that.
From what I have been told, the guys who used to have MXR, that's their new thing. So.
Well, MXR pedals were still some of the... I mean, the Phase 90 is the sound of like Van Halen 1 and 2.
Yeah, that and the flanger.
Yeah, you just slow that down. You just like, how do you get that guitar sound? I don't know.
It is.
Plug in the Phase 90.
That and the 57.
Yeah. Great. So those are fantastic.
We use these on vocals.
Right.
And the room, overheads, bass.
Right. Perfect. And then good old DBX.
Yeah, these things are great.
That's my kick in. I've used it on a kick in since I was...
Yeah, kick and snare go through there every time I track.
Right.
Bass and vocals also. People frown on them a little bit because
not many.
No, like it's a very affordable piece of gear.
Very affordable, and I'll let anybody watching know that every studio in LA has at least 2 of these.
Yeah.
Every studio. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's a $2,000 a day or not.
Yeah.
I mean, this is pretty much the go-to kick-in compressor of any engineer I've ever met.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And you want to hear a funny story? Paul Rogers.
Yeah. We
were doing that Muddy Waters tribute.
Yeah.
I was assisting it. And they set up the C12, I believe, into a 1073, into like LA2A or whatever. It's nice, good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like $20,000 chain by the time you're done, right? He sings, he comes in, they check it out, and he's like, my vocals don't sound right. It's like, this is good stuff. It's like, yeah, but it's not the mic I usually use. Like, well, what mic do you usually use? I don't really know the name of it, but I can find out. But it's, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning in England or whatever. Give me till the morning or whatever. And he comes in. I was like, here, the engineer said you would know what this means. 57 and a 160X. Put it on, and it sounded
like Paul Rogers.
Amazing. Sounded like him. The engineers didn't trust it enough to only record that, so they compromised that they would leave that other chain set up and they would put the new one right underneath for him.
Right.
And they ended up using the 57.
Nice. Yeah. It's Paul Rogers. I mean, Fire and Water.
Yeah.
Top 10 album for me of all time. Yeah. That album's amazing. Then his tone. I mean, he was probably 19 or 20 when he did that.
Yeah.
Fire and Water. I mean,
yeah.
Crazy.
And it goes to show you, like sometimes it's not the price tag on gear that decides if you should use it or not.
Sure. Guitar Center sometimes does deals on 57s for $79.
Yeah. I have 4 of them. I could use another 4.
Yeah.
No,
it's great.
I don't think you can ever have enough 57s.
I agree. I mean, it's rock and roll is the sound of snare, top and bottom for most people. Guitars, and some people handheld, especially for singers that are live singers only, and they don't know, because sometimes it's not the best sounding mic on a vocal, but it's the best sounding performance mic, because a lot of guys just want to hold a mic and sing.
That's the thing, it's much easier to fix the sound than it is to fix a performance.
Yes. Yeah, if a guy's in there and he's just wailing and he's holding a 57, that's better than him sitting in front of a U47 going, I am really uncomfortable.
Yes, and what is this dental apparatus in front of me?
Yes, exactly.
And you have to imagine that the singer's instrument is his whole body.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not just the mouth where it comes out of. These guys, especially in rock bands or whatever, when they're performing, they're hunched over, they're doing things with their bodies that cause them to make those sounds. And all of a sudden they're supposed to stand up straight, and, and be happy about it. Yeah. No, it doesn't work like that.
So let me ask you, what is your go-to guitar chain?
If you had to tell me, I need a guitar sound in 1 minute, I would take a 57 into here and into tape, and that's it.
Right.
And if you gave me 2 minutes...
57 Focusrite, gave you 2 minutes.
If you gave me 2 minutes, I would take a 57. Right. Probably a D2, an Audix D2. Right. And I put it through this guy, which are basically Focusrite preamps. Right. Not basically, that's what they are, but they're basically like a poor man's version of these. Yeah. Put them in here, put them into two channels here. Yeah. And then send that through here to tape.
These are the same pre's that are in the Sapphire Pro Fault Sapphire?
That sounds right. Yeah. Yeah.
So you would go 57 and D2.
Mm-hmm. And then I'd go into line in over here. Actually, this is what happened on the last record that just finished yesterday. Yeah. Into here, and then from here on out via the sub out. 2 is probably what it was. And then go from there into here. Yeah. And use the EQ.
And use the EQ. Mm-hmm. And what are you doing EQ-wise for guitars? What's your sort of... And I know everything's going to be slightly different, but do you have a sort of a certain feel like you like to boost and cut?
I can mostly give you a standard general answer.
Yeah.
Because it is
standard general is good.
There's two competing things that happen. One of them is the instrument's qualities. There's always a murkiness somewhere and the beautiful sound somewhere else. So you want to try to diminish the murkiness and bring out the shine.
Sure.
And those frequencies can be all over the place. Murkiness in the guitars are usually somewhere in the, between 300 and 800 hertz in there somewhere. Sure. And then, you have the sizzle and the shine up on top, but the danger is, and we'll get into it in a minute, you have all these other instruments that need to exist in the song, in the mix. Right. And what sounds good on one instrument might actually sound good on another one as well. Right. So they're competing there. Sure. But you have to carve space out. So you have to kind of move that around. And in guitars, there's always the danger of having too much of that crunch. Right. That steps on the vocals and the snare. Sure. So diminishing some of that will actually allow you to turn guitars up louder elsewhere or around that, and you'll still have space around the snare and the vocals. So there's usually an attempt to scoop out a little bit of that somewhere in that unpleasant crunchiness that would step on the snare and the vocals.
And what sort of frequencies are we talking?
It's in the 1K area, right? Somewhere between 1 and 4K, right? Generally speaking, right? And they're sometimes very narrow of a notch, right? Take out some of that because let's say you have a vocal that really sits nice. Let's say around 2K, right? And you have a guitar that would sound good from 1 to 3.
Right.
Let's suck out a little bit of the 2 so you can boost a bit on the 1 and the 3 around where the vocal sits, you know?
Right.
Just like puzzle that out a little bit.
Right.
And that always changes because everybody's voice is different. And,
sure.
And, you know, guitar sounds are different, tunings are different. You know?
Right.
Like the lower you get, the scratchier it gets. And, you know.
No, but that's great. That's a great tip, because I think that if somebody even just applies those existing numbers, like I would just go back and mix with that, and then knowing that philosophy, sort of move it around until it starts to work.
Yeah.
You know, boosting a little bit on the vocal and going, oh, that sits well. Maybe it's 3.
Sure,
you know,
yeah. Maybe. But it's the thing is, you know, you have those mixed template numbers.
Sure.
Like, and I can't get myself to look at them or much less memorize them.
No, I understand.
Because you really, like, you have to use your ears.
Sure.
You know, that's the most important piece of equipment in the studio is your head and your ears.
But it's a great starting point for all of us to kind of...
and that's where presets come in, really, and plugins, you know?
Yeah.
And presets are great for several reasons. One reason is it gives you a starting point. It's like, oh, what would he do? Or what did they do? What do they think would work?
Right.
And it gives you, oh, okay, we can do this. Let's move it around some and see what happens. But the other reason why plugins are great, or presets and plugins are great, something's not right about this track or this thing, or what could it needs something. And you just like cycle through presets and go like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let's explore that direction. Or that didn't work. It's like, oh, maybe this. And it's like, it gives you an idea. It's like, oh, I would never thought to put a flanger on this, or like reverb the hell out of it, or distort, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It's a quick way of changing a lot of things at once, you know.
Yeah, I like that analogy. It's like, I think of, there's a quote from Keith Richards, like when he's writing songs, sometimes if he just gets stuck, he just goes to like a Motown station or something and flicks through and listens just to take his mind and completely just inspire him, and then he goes back and goes, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Somebody else's creativity can spark your own creativity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I love that. See, this, I don't know how much this is, but
it's probably about $300, $400, something like that. So
really inexpensive. You can go to Guitar Center, and you can make records on it.
That's the thing nowadays. You know, people get so hung up on. I'm sure you do too. Get asked like, "What's the best microphone? What's the best compressor? What's the best design?" It's like, it doesn't exist. Yeah. Like, you can get what's the most expensive one. It's like, well, that's the one that you pay the most for, and that'll be the most expensive. But the really the best microphone is the one that's in your hands when you're ready to perform. Right. You know what I mean? I think it goes back to like, was it easier to fix a sound or a performance? Right. You know what I mean? There really aren't any rules in recording except for just a very few. My number one rule is if the singer wants to sing, if you have a singer who wants to sing, everything stops and you sing. Yeah. You know what I mean? Everything else kind of, and I know that's why singers have floated heads and stuff that comes with the program, but they have to think that they're great because it's their body that's doing this thing, you know?
So what do we got? This is
just your standard issue Behringer. I never really got around to upgrading that thing. Again, it's $50,000 worth of concrete. You know, it's
all the money's in the concrete.
Yeah. So this room hasn't been around all that long. Right. I'm going to say 2006. I was in the A-frame, and then I've only been here for like 4 years now. In this one. So, you know, we're just slowly, each project to add another piece of equipment. Right. The most important one really in here is this thing, this monitoring thing. It's this hearback. It's just, you know, it's a little hearback monitor. It's for musicians to get comfortable. Right. You know? It's probably the most important piece of equipment in here aside from, you know, my speakers.
We were talking to a studio owner yesterday about how that gets ignored. He's a live sound guy that's doing engineering stuff, so he understands like monitoring and stuff like that. And he had like the most elaborate monitoring. Yeah. And it's great because if you're sitting there and you got the world's worst mix and you're trying to play out, you're just
uninspiring. You know, you gotta, part of the job of record producers, make sure that everybody's in a good mood or in a bad mood when they need to be to get the performance out of it. You know, like to make it possible for the artists to be themselves. Yeah. You know, whatever that entails. Yeah. But so you know, I decide to buy equipment in the order of importance for the artist, not necessarily for me, because nowadays you can see all this equipment, it adds up, it's adds up to be a lot of money, but it's much more affordable than you have. I mean, you can spend a lot more money if you want to, but you don't have to, because the equipment nowadays is really good.
So you have the Symphony?
I have the Symphony. I have 24 analog ins, 8 analog outs, and I don't know, it was like 6,000 digital ins and outs or something like that. Which actually is really handy because I have a light wire output from here into here, and this is a Cat5 setup, so it's really easy to route it. And this thing is affordable too.
Yeah, so the Symphony does so much for you. Yeah,
I did have the other ones, but it didn't have enough. I only had 16 ins and 16 outs with the ADAX or whatever the Apogee was, and it just needed more inputs to do drums properly.
So I have to ask you, the Ashley stuff. Now, the reason why I asked about Ashley, I had a studio in England, and we had an Ashley compressor.
Yeah.
And I remember this guy, Andy Fernbank, I think his name was. He was Dave Gilmour's engineer, came into our studio to do some tracking. And it was like a 80s generic Ashley, and he'd never seen one because obviously he'd been in like studios of LA2As, blah, blah, blah. Sure. And we put the vocal through it, and he's like, I love this. He'd never been exposed to an Ashley compressor before. It was quite crazy.
Yeah. This thing works really well on some stuff. And so does this. It's like a 7-band EQ or something like that. They're just like, it has a little personality for one thing or another.
Right.
And
now the SansAmp, you told me you lent that to Geddy Lee?
Yeah, they were looking for one in town to while they were mixing, I think, the live album or something, and they couldn't find one. And I know Time over at Tech 21 and Andy, their manager, and one of them said to the other, "Hey, get Ulrich's." And I said, "Sure,
nice.
Why not?" And they needed it for like 3 days or something, or a week or something, to run all the bass through it.
Grind it up a bit, yeah. I use the SansAmp plugin on bass all the time.
Yeah.
It's great. And then what's the bottom thing? That was the power plant.
That's a power plant. It's not an ART box. I think I'm endorsed by them.
Right.
And I'm not.
You're not endorsed by them, you should be.
This one I've had for many, many years. I actually bought this one during the White Zombie days. This actually works. It's a guitar preamp, and it sounds great on bass, drums, vocals, loops, but not on guitars.
Right. That's crazy.
Charlie Clouser actually turned me onto that thing. He, at the time, I don't know, he probably has moved on to different things at this point, but at the time, he used that thing to crunch up loops and to make distort loops. That was
nice.
his go-to. He had another version that looked all flashy and pink writing. I don't know if you remember those.
Yeah, I do remember those. Well, thanks, Ulrich.
Well, my pleasure.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Anytime, we're good. We're gonna come back.
All right.
Thank you ever so much for watching. Please, as ever, leave a whole bunch of comments and questions down below. We touched on a lot of stuff: guitar recording, some drum recording. We'd love to get your feedback. We could come back and talk to Ulrich about mixing stuff and everything. We could have some real fun here. So please leave some questions and comments below. Help us with some future videos. And also, I'd love to know how you do stuff because, frankly, I get quite a lot of tips from you guys. So thank you ever so much for watching. Please go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list. Subscribe and have a marvelous time recording.